Okay. Testing. Oh, we're on. Good evening. It's wonderful to see you all here this evening as we tackle an important issue for our city and for our community. We all love our lake. I think I was thinking back of before I moved to Mitchell. I remember wondering to myself, I knew there was this college I was going to apply to in South Dakota. I lived in Tennessee. And I remember asking myself, you know, I really like getting out and riding bikes and, you know, going for runs. And so I got on did some Googling around. It's like, is there a lake right around there? And realizing there's a lake right next door. And it made this community more appealing to me. I was talking to someone just the other day, and she said, I learned how to swim in that lake. And I said, well, you probably wouldn't want to swim in it now. So, although I hear some people still do swim in the lake, so I don't, so to each their own. But I'm not going in. I'm just not, when it stinks, I'm not going in. So it's great to have you here. It's an important topic. How do we revive our lake? And then a more specific question, does it need to be dredged? That's the fundamental question we're looking at in this debate. Does the lake need to be dredged? So this is a Braver Angels debate. I'm the director of the McGovern Center, and the McGovern Center is now a Braver Angels Alliance organization. Braver Angels is the largest depolarization organization in the United States. We're committed to having or improving the national discourse about things that divide us, both local issues and national issues, and so this here would be a local issue. Seeing the lake is about a mile away from where we're sitting. So we were wanting to improve the conversation and to have meaningful conversations. This is a controversial issue, and but we have to find ways and context to have conversations even when it's difficult. So Braver Angels is an organization that gives us materials and encouragement, and there's a whole section of Braver Angels called Rise for America. And so this is really a part of that movement to rise for America and improve our national discussion and national debate. So what are Braver Angels debates? Braver Angels debates are really not debates at all. They're really more controlled and organized and civil conversations among large groups of people. So there's not going to be a winner or a loser. This isn't meant to be competitive in any way. So can all kind of relax. There's no competition. There's no winners or losers. It's just an opportunity to have a conversation in this controlled context. And so essentially these debates are guided and structured conversations. And so another good way to think about a Braver Angels debate is that it's a collective search for the truth. And so I want us all to kind of put aside our biases and just say to ourselves, I'm here to seek the truth. And I'm not going to, be committed to a bias or a perspective that maybe I've already kind of taken. I want to open myself up and just receive and understand and consider what the truth might be. And of course, we're going to have different opinions on what the truth is, but still, it's good to have that as a focus. So it's not an opportunity to prove someone else wrong. It's not an opportunity to kind of grandstand for other causes. It's just a community search for the truth. So we have two whips, and I'm very pleased to have their assistants, Jeff Pospisil and Alethea Underheil. They're both trained debate moderators as well, and they'll be helping us to put this debate on. Thank you very much. And so as a whip, they help to organize the conversation. So if you feel like you have a question that you are uncomfortable asking the whole group, or if you would like to have someone help you to kind of craft a question, or if you want to write down your question, and I was going to bring note cards and I didn't, but maybe they could. Anyway, if you want to just get a hold of them and share with them your question if you feel uncomfortable raising it to the whole group. But so they're here to help organize this event, and I really appreciate their assistance. And they're also, by the way, I should say, they're also members of Braver Angels, and so we're the three Braver Angels of Mitchell, I think. Maybe there are more, but there are only three that I know of. And so they also, whenever Braver Angels wants, their kind of commitment is for any organization that happens on the local or national level to have reds and blues and purples equally represented, and I think we represent those three pretty well. So, we're kind of the organizational team, and so I appreciate their assistance with this very much. So what are the rules for a Brave Angels conversation? First of all, I have a gavel. I have a gavel, and it will fall. And when it does here, and I'm hoping that this podium doesn't keel over when I hit that gavel, because it's not a real sturdy podium. But at any rate, maybe I'll pick it up and hit it like this, like that, or something. But at any rate, when the gavel falls, the debate will begin. And when the debate begins, some magical things happen. One of them is that I no longer am Joel, I'm Mr. Moderator. And so I will thank you to refer to me as Mr. Moderator. So that's one principle. And then rule number one is we always want you to say what you actually think and believe. So when you stand up to make a speech, and any of you can make a speech this evening, I'll explain the order of things, but when you stand, we don't want you to grandstand, we don't want you to try to show off. We love to see speeches from the heart, and you can stand and say, I don't understand this. You don't even have to, claim to have any great knowledge about it. You can just be kind of your perspective from where you are. So, but it has to be truthful to you. And so we want you to whatever you say, always say what you actually think and believe. So the rule number two, and thank you for Jeff, he's really great at PowerPoint. So all questions and answers should be addressed to the moderator and not to the speaker of the not to the person. The speaker in our lingo is the person that's giving the speech at that particular time. And I'm the moderator, and if you stand to ask a question after they finish their speech, then you're the questioner. So we're going to try this out. So Jeff is just finishing a speech on why dogs are better than cats. So let's hear your speech, Jeff.
All right. Dogs are better than cats because they don't expect anything from you.
Okay, so that's the speech. Dogs are better than cats. Does anybody have a question that they'd like to ask? Oh, Alethea, what is your question?
Mr. Moderator, what does the speaker think about the cost of owning a dog versus the cost of owning a cat?
Okay, I'll check with him. Well, what do you think? No, excuse me. You're to ask your answer to me and not to her. So, okay. To me.
All right. Mr. Moderator.
Yes, thank you.
I think that cats, although they are less expensive because you don't have to feed them, you can just put them outside. Dogs are still better.
Yeah. There we go. Thank you very much. So you could say, Mr. Moderator, I wonder if the speaker has considered this point. Mr. Moderator, I would like the speaker to give an example of this. Mr. Moderator, Mr. in this case, I wonder if the speaker knows of more recent developments. So those kinds of things, but they're all addressed to the moderator, and this is kind of parliamentary style. And so everything is addressed to the moderator and goes to the moderator, and it helps to keep emotions down a bit. So. Finally, we express approval by tapping. Brave Angels is this weird organization that has these weird rules. And so let's hear some tapping. Yeah, so after someone gets done with a speech, you do a little tapping. Larry, you've been to these before. You know what we're doing here. So you tap, and tapping shows approval. And so even if you disagree with a speech, you can tap just because you appreciate someone's being willing to make it. Or if someone says something you really, really like, you tap. Or if someone says something that's really rude and mean and ugly and you totally disagree with it, you can tap. No, don't tap then. You wouldn't tap then. But you tap, you express approval by tapping. So that's kind of a Brave Angels thing. And finally, this is a little bit tricky, and I can understand there would be some, but anyway, we don't want the conversation to get bogged down in people challenging each other's sources. Questions about sources are super important. Of course they are. But maybe if you have a question about sources, you could ask it personally later or come to one of us and we'll get you in touch. But sometimes it can get bogged down. And so we just want to keep the conversation moving along. So we are going to how can we revive Lake Mitchell? And the resolution, remember the resolution doesn't mean that the people organizing the debate believe this. It's just what the question of the night is, or the statement that you're either going to be arguing for or against. So it's not, so we're taking a neutral position, but our resolution is Lake Mitchell needs to be dredged. And just so we know, by dredging, we're referring to drawing down the lake, mechanically, not hydraulically, but mechanically removing the 6 inches to 7 feet of phosphorus-laden sediment that is in the bottom of our lake. And then so it's not, we're not going to be debating the watershed issues and removing phosphorus from the water coming through the watershed. That's not, of course, that's an important project, and that will be taking our time and money years into the future. But that's not the point for tonight. The point for tonight, the question for tonight is: do we need to dredge the lake? Is that a key part? This hydraulic dredging. Now, hang on with me. Nobody get too upset when I say this, but we're going with city numbers. I know they're controversial, but so the dredging itself, 13 million. The full project, 25. I've read those numbers in the paper. So. But we did get them from the city. So those are the numbers that we're assuming going into this conversation. If you have if you believe the numbers are misrepresented here, please address that to the city council individually, or you can maybe ask some of the friends of the Fire Steel who are here with us. So there we are. So the way it's going to work is we're going to have a speech in the positive, and then a pro speech, which is we need to dredge, con speech, and those two will be from the community, so it'll be Paula Mazer and Jordan Hansen. And then a con speech, we will have, a pro speech specialist will be Charles Eikenberry of FIRA, now Houston Engineering, and a con speech specialist will be John Tucci, who is here with us from Ever Blue Lakes, and Charles will be on Zoom. So we'll do that, and then we have a next step, and then after that, the next step, we'll have discussion. So, Paula, why don't you come up and get your PowerPoint up on the screen? That should power down. And let me read the. Yeah, that will. Oh, yes, of course.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Can you come pull it out? It's kind of hard to pull out. Okay, so Paula Mazer, and for the first 4 speeches we're doing bios. We're not going to do any bios after that, but for the first 4 speeches. Paula Mazer, her postdoctoral research was in environmental molecular science at the Environmental Molecular Science Institute in Ohio State University, studying carbon cycling in aquatic environments. After that, she worked at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia as a biogeochemist, working closely with the oceanography department, studying aquatic toxicology and carbon cycling. She's a member of and recipient of the faculty fellowship grant through South Dakota BRIN, a statewide NIH-funded project. Paul is currently the outreach officer for the Sioux Valley section of the American Chemical Society and the vice president-elect of the South Dakota Academy of Science. She worked with the city's Lake Technical Advisory Team from 2016 to 2018 and has served as on the board of the Friends of the Fire Steel since May 2020, right during COVID. So here you go.
All right.
Let's welcome Paula.
All right, so you heard I'm a scientist, therefore my opinion is going to be based on the science as I understand it. To explain it, I've got to explain to you the science as I understand it. So here's our problem. We've got a 95-year-old reservoir with a gigantic watershed that it drains. It goes clear from Wesleyan Springs in the north down to almost White Lake in the southwest. 350,000 acres. That's about half the size of the state of Rhode Island. So it's not exactly small. And for the past 95 years, this rich land has been draining into our lake, developing a huge nutrient reserve. Specifically, we're going to talk about phosphorus. Now, our phosphorus levels, as we know, for the past few years have been fluctuating between 800 and 1,400 parts per billion in the summer. For context, those lovely clean lakes in northern Minnesota are considerably less than 80 parts per billion, so we got a bit more. And the form of our phosphorus is phosphate. Now, this is the most stable, most oxidized form of phosphorus. It's the form of phosphorus used by all living things. So living organisms don't change it. They just take it up, use it, and when they die, it returns to the water. And it just keeps cycling and building up and building up. But over those 95 years, we've also developed a huge reserve of phosphate in the organic sediment at the bottom of the lake. Now, I'm ignoring the mineralized phosphate that's not really available to organisms, but just the stuff that's loosely soaked into the bottom that can slowly dissolve back out. We've got about a 10-ton reserve down there. And that 10 tons can slowly dissolve out and replace whatever we remove. So we clean up the watershed, we remove phosphate from the water in the lake. Doesn't matter, that reserve is able to slowly dissolve out and replace it. Now, just like putting sugar in my glass of iced tea, if something is dissolving slowly, you can make it dissolve faster by stirring it. We don't want that. We do not want more phosphate in the water. That'll make the algae blooms worse. So we can't afford to stir. In fact, if you don't remember anything else that I say, remember that one. We cannot afford to stir. So when I look at our options, this is what I see. We could continue to do nothing and things will just keep getting worse. We could try hydraulic dredging, which is what they're doing in Pier at Capitol Lake. If you don't remove the water, that's a really efficient way of stirring. Deep aeration, I know, has been suggested. That's a method designed to break down organic sediment by stirring the top layers of sediment and adding oxygen and enzymes to break down the organic sediment. Stirring. So that I cross that off my list. Plants certainly take up nutrients and they will use the nutrients in the water, but that's not very effective at stripping that 10-ton reserve. And of course, we can't risk invasive plants. Invasive plants could escape downstream and open us up to lawsuits. So as far as I'm concerned, the only remaining scientifically viable option is a drawdown and dredge. So we slowly draw down the lake water using the drawdown structure the city's going to build. And at that point, slowly means no stirring. Scoop out that reserve and then let the lake fill back up. It's the only way we can eliminate the reserve without stirring. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Paula, very much. Do you have any of you have questions for Paula? Mike. Yes. Here, you'll need to use the mic because we're live feeding.
Okay, Mr. Moderator, would the speaker answer the question, what would be the process for the slow drawdown? I'm just curious how they do that.
Paula?
So they're intending to put a drawdown structure into the dam itself. It's basically just a tunnel that's gated. And so it allows us a lot of good things to be able to lower the water level to help, ameliorate storm surges, or to lower it a little to make it easier to do bank modifications. But basically they would just install that, they're going to anyway, slowly open the valve and let it slowly drain down. There are no average years in our lake, but an average year has enough rain to fill the lake about 5 times. So in all likelihood, it wouldn't take more than a year to refill. The past 2 years, we had a lot less than average rainfall, but in 2019, we had like 6 years of rainfall in one. So who knows what we'll get, but it should only take about a year to refill if we're lucky.
Thank you, Paula. And I just realized I didn't gavel in, and I bought a gavel. I'm going to get a little late. Gavel in. So, yes, sir. I just. Okay.
You can take that.
Okay.
With your ambition to do a slow drawdown, not to stir things up, how far can you draw down? Can you drain the entire lake so the dredging could commit to the entire basin of the lake and get down to the original man-made portion, so therefore we get a deeper lake, and we have the best benefit of removing all of that algae?
Okay, great. Paula, you wanna just... Yeah, so Paula, here's the question for you.
So it's my understanding that we can't go completely down because we've got to keep some water reserve for Poet. Because their Poet is taking, what, about 500 gallons a day out of the lake? 500,000 gallons a day, okay. So we have to keep a little bit of water in the lake. But at the deepest, it's about 26 feet. I think we can get down 20 easily enough.
Actually, we have a lot of real estate to cover here, and so I didn't explain this with the earlier rules. Each speech is 4 minutes long. Sorry for not explaining this, and then followed by 2 questions. So we've already had 2 questions. So we're going to move on to the next speech, okay? So we need to move on. So, so Jordan, why don't you come and get yours set up? You're connected already? All right. So where is the... Can I just read the bio? So Jordan Hansen is a lifelong Mitchell, South Dakota resident. He spent thousands of hours on the shoreline and waters of Lake Mitchell. I know he loves to fish, so a lot of that's fishing, no doubt. So Jordan has dedicated a significant portion of his life to finding an affordable and effective solution to Lake Mitchell's problems. There we go, Jordan.
Well,
So let's tap Jordan.
Do I get a
in.
microphone?
Yep, there we go.
Can I have a better microphone?
Yep, sure. This is a little easier. Yep.
Okay, this doesn't work?
Yep.
All right. Is anyone timing me or do I time myself?
Yep, we got a timer.
Okay.
Carter is our timer.
Okay, can I start?
Yep.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Jordan Hansen, and I'm going to start with a quick history of what's been done to our lake so far. So my father actually took this picture in the 80s because he said if they drained our lake, or they dredged our lake, excuse me, and ripped out those cattails, it would ruin our ecosystem in our lake. And that happened. So 20 years later, we lost our drinking source, costing millions of dollars to our city, and they attempted to fix it with alum. It didn't work, and that was hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the first dredge project made our lake worse. The first time we used alum, didn't work. Why would we try that again? The devastation of our ecosystem continued through the 90s, ripping out the trees, and then we had to put rocks out there to stop the erosion, is what they say. But rocks are one of the worst things you can do to a stagnant lake because it attracts heat and therefore blooms algae. This is what a natural, healthy lake is supposed to look like. Blue water and green trees. Now, how many of you guys have read all the studies in the last 20 years? Just to let you know, this is what it looks like. This is millions of dollars worth of studies, thousands of pages. I've read it all. Now, one thing they mentioned a lot is 90 parts per billion is our target. Bar Engineering, who's not here tonight, on a $40 million project, says once we dredge our lake, at best, we're going to have 560 parts per billion. That's nowhere near 90 that we need. So why would we spend $25 million to not even reach our target? And to prove this, this was in their report. Bar Engineering in 2016 dredged a lake. They drained it. It took 3 to 4 feet of sediment out. Exact same company, exact same plan. 6 years later, this lake had to get shut down because of algae. 6 years. I mean, we still owe $25 million and still have a lake like we have today. Now, the plan to dredge our lake is not the entire lake. This is from Bar's report. It's actually just a small portion towards the top. Everything down here that's in red is 4 feet thick of phosphorus, algae-causing phosphorus. They're not even going to touch that. Therefore, we need to put chemicals in our lake for the next 30 years at $500,000 a year, $15 million, $40 million total cost. Now, there is another option on the table, $11 million to aerate and do biological treatment. The mayor acknowledged this in this recent letter. He says the enzyme digests the lake so we can actually naturally clean the bottom of the lake up to 6 inches to 12 inches a year. It takes a little longer, but I'd wait 5 years to save $30 million. Now, he also said aeration, both firms recommended staying away from it. In the reports, FIRA says it wasn't investigated in detail, and it could be an effective approach. This is from the report. Bar Engineering didn't mention it a single time in 357 pages. Well, what they did mention is phosphorus can release from the sediment when oxygen is depleted. Therefore, if we add oxygen, we won't release it. The Lake Mitchell Master Plan also says aeration should and could be explored for treatment. How many of you guys remember Mel Olson's report, if we don't dredge the lake, we have to call the EPA? I think we should, because you know what they recommend, the EPA? Aeration. That's the #1 recommended thing they recommend. Do you think the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, would like to see this? Does that look environmental? Or do you think they'd rather have us do what we recommend, what they recommend, and use aeration to clean our lake. The other thing they recommend is floating wetland treatments. You guys have probably heard about this. This is the sorry excuse of neglected wetlands we have right now floating in our lake. John's company, Everblue Lake, they would do something more like this, where we could party on them. We could hang out and have parks. And the reason you would do that is because using those upstream will clean out all the water coming in from the watershed. And that will take up to 20,000 pounds of phosphorus a year, which equates to about 10 million pounds of algae every single year. Now, I thought I got 5 minutes.
I will let you have one more.
Okay, I'm almost done. I have 3 more slides. Now to prove this, this was 6 weeks after water in one tank. This is 6 weeks after with plants. That's how clean the water got. And just this is my last slide. Friends of the Fire Steel, God bless them, they did a ton of work, but this is one of their reports. It also says that if we do this plan, we're going to have between 200 and 600 parts per billion. It also says on that same report, the EPA quantifies an endangered body of water at above 70 parts per billion. How many of you guys would want to spend $25 million and still have an impaired body of water?
Thank you, Jordan, very much. That was good. Thank you very much. So let's tap for Jordan. So questions for Jordan. Questions for Jordan. He flew through a ton of information. We both
I have
did.
60 more slides if you need.
Yeah. Questions for Jordan? Yes. Okay. Great. Thank you, Alethea.
Jordan, if I understood you correctly, they're not going to dredge the bays?
To stand for.
You have to say your name.
Can you say your name, sir?
Kevin Thurman. You're not going to dredge the bays completely?
That is 100% correct. This is from Bar Engineering right here. This is from their report, their study. They're going to stop right here, so right here. So anything beyond this is not going to get dredged.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's supposed to be addressed to me.
I'm sorry.
I got a little mixed
Mr. Moderator.
That's where a majority of the sediment is, correct? Is in the bays, 3 to 4 feet deep in places?
Yes, Mr. Moderator. That is where a majority of it is. Anywhere where it's red is over 4 feet thick of sediment. This is Bar Engineering. Actually, this one's from FIRA. It's the same thing from Bar.
Okay. A little information. Mitchell used to use the lake as a water source, which drew it down every year. Mm-hmm. And the wave action would not erode the shorelines as drastically as it does today with the full lake. Is there any plan to continue the stabilization of the lake?
That's 2 questions.
Okay.
And I don't know the answer to either of them.
So thank you, sir, for that question. Thank you very much. Sorry, I got a little off kilter. Okay.
He's excited.
Second question. You're right. I'm excited. Can we have, you asked the question already. Can I have another question? We just want to spread it out a little bit. So does anybody else have a question? Or no. I will get back to you if there's no other. Anybody else? Yeah, Mark. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, I've heard the speaker in past City Council meetings state that the phosphorus is removed via a cycle of organic organisms, and eventually the fish ends up consuming those. I also know that fish poop, and so I'm trying to figure out, so a lot of that phosphorus that's consumed by the fish then goes back to the bottom. Can you further clarify or explain how that phosphorus gets removed?
So he's probably the more expert of that, which he can answer. But basically, the bacteria, once you add it to the bottom of the lake, will eat that phosphorus up. That will then get turned into the food chain and work up its way into the food chain, into fish and other stuff, microorganisms, zooplankton, stuff like that. It'll also burp off a certain kind of gas. Rather than hydrogen sulfide, it could be carbon or oxygen. I'm not exactly sure of the oxygen, but that gas will just get released to the top of the water. So like at the end of the year, Mr. Moderator, if you drive out on the lake, you'll see big clumps of brown whatever. That's essentially the lake digesting now that the blue-green algae is not the top dominator. Does that make sense?
Great. Thank you very much, and I'm sure John will be able to...
John's a genius.
Yeah, so yeah, let's give Jordan a tap out. Appreciate that. 2 great opening speeches, very, very solid opening speeches. So great, that makes me excited just because we're having a great debate. So yes, so the next speech is going to be Charles Eikenberry. Charles, so we're going back to the pro side, and Charles Eikenberry is
I got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Alethea is going to read his bio.
So Dr. Charles Eikenberry has 22 years of experience in water resources engineering, which includes lake restoration, watershed, and water quality planning, as well as water budget and nutrient mass balance, modeling to support lake restoration. He holds a BS in civil engineering and MS and PhD in agricultural and biological systems engineering. He serves as HEI's Des Moines, Iowa office manager and is responsible for project management and business development in addition to his technical role in watershed and water quality. His favorite projects involve solving complex water quantity and quality issues using systems dynamics tools to optimize outcomes and quantify risk and uncertainty. He regrets that he can't be here, but we do have him here on Zoom, and he is ironically attending and presenting at the North American Lake Management Society meeting at Lake Erie in Pennsylvania with other scientists and engineers grappling with lake restoration challenges. So greet him, tap for him.
Let's tap for Charles Eichenborg. Charles, take it away.
Before I start, I just want to make sure my audio is working. As Murphy's Law would dictate, I had the wireless here in my hotel room has failed me, so I'm on my cell phone. So unfortunately, I won't be able to share my presentation, but I will certainly make my points. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. So my talking points are really simple, and with only 4 minutes to speak, I'll move quickly. I want to discuss our qualifications and why we're even interested in Lake Mitchell, what our position is, and then explain our reasoning behind that position, and then I'll close with some final thoughts and recommendations. So our team was involved about 2017 through 2019 or so with some of the early study work that led to this latest couple years of work on Lake Mitchell. Our work included collection of sediment cores and some very thorough analysis of the sediment in Lake Mitchell, including mapping it, not only just the sediment thickness, but also the sediment geochemistry. We also developed a very thorough water balance simulation tool for the lake so that we understood how the lake fills and empties and where the water's coming from. And in addition to that, we quantified the phosphorus sources that enter the lake and that leave the lake, but also that phosphorus source that recycles internally within the lake. So we know this system quite well. We have not had any involvement with the project for a few years now, but we have a lot invested in this project and we're passionate about lake work, so that's why I'm here with you this evening. What is our position? Our position has always been that restoring and protecting Lake Mitchell will require a multi-tiered approach, and of course it has to include watershed improvement. We've got to reduce long-term sediment and nutrient loads to the lake from Firesteel Creek. We've never said anything other than that. However, we also believe that we have to get at that internal load for a couple reasons. First, because it's important to get some early momentum here, or folks are going to lose patience and get frustrated and walk away from an opportunity here. We also think we need to dredge the lake to set back the clock and give us a puncher's chance of meeting some of these long-term water quality goals. The reasons are the following. First, this lake is flushed very frequently. Paula mentioned this earlier. We did not conspire. We didn't talk about this issue, but in March of 2018, there was enough water flowing through Firesteel Creek that in 1 week alone, the lake volume was replenished 4 times. And in an average year, as Paula noted, that happens several times in an average year. And so we would question alternatives that involve adding a material to the lake water column. It's going to be lost quickly. It's just, we're very leery of that kind of approach for Lake Mitchell. The second reason is the lake is very old. You've heard about that. It's an engineered system. It's nearly 100 years old. And on day one, when that lake began to fill with water, it also began to fill with sediment and phosphorus. And that old age of the lake has also led to the fact that it's got very, very rich organic sediment. And some very interesting things going on in that sediment that are not altogether well understood and totally predictable. But 2 things I want to emphasize is there's a lot of ferrous-bound phosphorus in that sediment, and there's a lot of organic phosphorus in that sediment. Those 2 elements, if they're subjected to aggressive aeration without being a good amount of that material being removed from the lake first, you really risk doing more harm than good. as you can remineralize the organic phosphorus and destabilize some of the vivionite that's down there in a fairly stable form right now that's holding onto that phosphorus. So I don't like those two approaches. And with any approach that you're hearing about tonight, I would encourage everyone to ask themselves, how does it work? Is it being explained adequately? If it does work, what happens to the phosphorus once it comes out of that sediment? And then what does that have in terms of downstream implications? So my final thoughts are, we believe it's best to get as much of that material out of the lake as possible. Yes, there will be other things that might be necessary to do to address what's left behind. Meanwhile, we've got to improve the water quality of Firesteel Creek. And I do understand the intimidating cost associated with a project like this. I'm not here to tell the taxpayers of Mitchell what to do with their money, but I would also just ask that that people recognize that doing nothing also has a cost as well as a failed effort. So those are my thoughts, and I'd be happy to answer some questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate Charles and his taking the time out of this conference. Yes, we do have a question for you, sir.
Mr. Moderator, did I hear him correct?
Yeah, we need to hear you. They need to hear you on the live stream. So.
Mr. Moderator, did I hear him correct stating that he was against adding something to the water column, like alum or something?
Charles, he's asking if you had stated something about not adding something to the water column, like talum.
Yeah,
alum,
no, I appreciate the opportunity to clarify that statement. So our position is, unless and until a good amount of that sediment is removed, we would not recommend adding something to the water column. And we would also suggest that when alum was applied to the lake in the past, it had limited effectiveness. The duration just didn't last very long. And I would argue that that's in large part because a lot of that alum was flushed out during high runoff events. So essentially, he did hear me correctly, yes.
Thank you, Charles. Another question? Yes. And thank you, Alethea.
Vanessa Clock. I did hear you say that it was a... Oh, Mr. Moderator, I apologize. I did hear him say that it was a multi-tiered process. What does that process consist of, and how long approximately do you foresee that taking?
So how long do you see the process taking and the elements in it?
Great question. So whether people like to hear this or not, I tell everyone that is lucky enough to own and operate and manage a lake, that lake management is a process, it's not a project. And so, not to be snarky, but the correct answer to the question is managing water quality of a lake is an ongoing process, and it goes on as long as that lake is there. But in terms of making significant progress to water quality goals, it really all comes down to how much traction we can get in the watershed to reduce those loads from Firesteel Creek, because those are always going to be working against us until we can get those down to a more sustainable level. The dredging itself and getting at that internal phosphorus load, that should have a rather apparent immediate effect, and people will start to see what might be possible in Lake Mitchell. But I do not want to apply that a single project, even a dredging project, is going to fix all the problems overnight. I want to be very clear about that.
Okay. Thank you, Charles. Let's tap for Charles. Thank you. I don't know, Charles, can you hear us tapping for you? It's our way of saying thanks.
No, and I'll try to hang on. Maybe I can recover my my actual laptop connection, but I may have to leave you all just because of technology limitations here. I apologize.
Okay. Thank you, Charles. We very much appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
And so, so if we can get Stanley, I can't believe I did that. His name is John Tucci. He looks like Stanley Tucci, right? So they are third cousins. So, so John Tucci from Every Blue Lakes is with us. And so while he's
Yep. I could read. Let me introduce the president and founder of Ever Blue Lakes, John Tucci. And then after this, it will be open after the questions to other people to make their own 2-minute speeches. I think. We have the videos. Oh, after the videos. So we are getting close. I almost jumped ahead. But John, he founded Ever Blue Lakes in 2007 with the mission of bringing natural, sustainable, and affordable technologies to solve muckweed and algae problems while making lakes healthier and cleaner for generations to come. John is a U.S. patent holder for the innovative aeration technology specifically designed for large lakes and reservoirs from hundreds to thousands of acres in size and depths from 5 to 50 meters and more. In addition, Everblue has sourced or developed innovative biological treatment, watershed management, and phosphorus inactivation technologies to offer a fully integrated, sustainable process for lake restoration. Since its founding, Everblue Lakes has grown to become the most successful natural lake restoration in the country, with more than 100 projects from Oregon and California on the West Coast to Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, and Indiana right here in the Midwest, to Connecticut, New York, and North Carolina in the East Coast. Here we go.
Thank you very much. So this is my third trip from Michigan to Mitchell. At the request of citizens that have expressed concerns about whether or not the dredging project as proposed is a good idea for Lake Mitchell. At Everblue Lakes, we always put what's best for the lake and best for the community first, and we often walk away from projects where we're not the right fit. So it is in that spirit that I can unequivocally say that dredging is not, the current dredging plan is not a good solution for Lake Mitchell, and I'm going to make 4 points in 4 minutes. If I turn this on, to make that point. 1, is the dredging project as proposed good value for the money? This is a question every lake community needs to ask themselves about every project you engage in, because at the end of the day, it is about money. What can we afford to do? And how long can we afford to do it for? 2, what is the potential impact of the proposed plan on human health? What is the potential impact on lake algae and lake ecology, or what is the likely impact on those from the proposed dredging project? And finally, dredging. Who is it good for? So those are the 4 points we're going to cover. This was the plan that had been published in the paper. The numbers may have changed, but I think the spirit of the plan is about the same. So the published cost of the total project was $53.9 million over 30 years, with $13 million allocated to actually dredging material out of the lake. Engineering, site prep, including the drawdown structure, roughly totaling around $12 million. Alum treatment at the time of this proposal was $500,000 a year, every year moving forward, potentially for 13 years, so $15 million. And interest on the loan, $14 million, which today is probably a lot higher than that. So the question is, or the point is, only 24% of this budget, and I would encourage you to do this math on any currently proposed budget to determine what is the percentage of money of that budget that's actually going to dig material out of the lake. That's the key question. Is it good value for the money spent? Would you spend 30 years of a mortgage and 100% of the cost of a house to get a house that's 24% built? Good question. What are the potential human health impacts? Well, the dredging plan to save money, which is a good idea, involves draining the lake for a potentially long period of time. Arsenic is commonly found in lake sediments, and almost certainly in the sediments in Lake Mitchell. I think there has been some testing. It may not be, critically huge levels, but there is arsenic in those sediments. Does the wind ever blow in Mitchell? If you have a dry lake bed, and are there any residents in town with respiratory issues? If you have a dry lake bed, what will be the impact of a potentially dried out portion of that lake bed with winds blowing across the prairie, spreading that dust over town? What's the human health impact? What's the impact on the paint on the buildings, the paint on the cars? Is this what you want to live with for several years for $54 million? What about the impact on lake ecology? There's not been one documented case that I've been able to find of a lake dredging project delivering even a 10-year improvement on eliminating algae blooms. So can Mitchell afford to pay for 30 years for a 5 to 10-year solution? Question. What about the impact on the critters that call Lake Mitchell home? Is it worth this kind of a situation where you're going to have fish kills, frog kills, turtle kills, to support the dredging project. That's up to you as a community, but we like to think of the lake as a living being, and we like to treat everything in it with care. So how much muck will the dredging project remove? 1 to 8 feet of compost estimated on the bottom of the lake feeding algae. At the current dollars of $13 million of dredging, that's going to skim about 1 to 1.5 feet off the top of the muck pile. Do you think skimming the top of the muck pile will solve the algae problem? And leaving 6 feet behind in some places. So dredging, who is it good for? Bad for taxpayers, bad for fish and wildlife, potentially bad for human health, pretty good for engineers and dredging companies, and pretty good for bankers.
Okay, let's hear it for John. Thank you. Thank you, John. So, questions for John? Questions for John? Or for the moderator? Let's prefer people. It's not that we can't come back to you a second time. It's just a preference for people that haven't asked.
Right over there. Right over here.
Okay. I see this hand over here. There we go. Thank you, Alethea.
Hi, Chelsea Garnes. So the lady that gave the first speech said that they would dredge slowly without emptying the water at all, and you're making it sound like it's going to be a big dust bowl, so I'm just kind of concerned on which is actually how it's going to be.
Yeah, good question. What I heard was they were going to draw the lake down to a water depth of where the water is currently 20 feet deep, and then which is about probably a 100-acre area of the 800-acre area of the lake that'll still have water in it. You can't dredge. They got to let the sediment dry out to some degree in order to get the heavy equipment in to dredge it out, or they won't be able to move that equipment around. So it's got to dry out to a degree.
And I keep forgetting the Mr. Moderator thing, so that's a Braver Angels thing, just so you know. We're kind of funny that way. Okay, second question, yes? Mr. Moderator. Can you... Yeah, the people on live stream need to be able to hear.
The speaker had mentioned in the bio there that the solution, the aerator solution, worked in 5 to, I believe it was 50 meters. If I'm correct, Lake Mitchell's average depth is 12 feet. So can someone explain to me if 80% of the lake is 12 feet, how that process is better or worse? I don't, either way.
Can I take it?
Mr. Moderator, it's a great question. I would ask my reader to check the notes. I believe I said it was 5 to 50 feet, not meters.
I think I said, yeah, it does say feet. If I misspoke, that's my bad.
So 5 to 50 feet is the typical depth of the projects that we've worked on so far.
Great, those are 2 questions. Thank you very much, John. Let's give John another tapping out, and not a tapping out, but okay. So because this ended up being scheduled when the City Council is meeting, they were not able to come, and I went to City Council the other day and said, look, if you're willing to shoot a short video, 4 minutes long, I'll let you. We'll play those. And so we have only 3 agreed, and so they're very, very short videos. We've got one from the mayor, who's pro, one from John Dozier, who's not for now. So he's not against dredging, but not for now. And then Susan Shark's a pro speech. So let's listen to those videos, and then after that, we'll jump in and ask questions. You can ask your questions.
Hi, I'm Mayor Bob Everson, Mayor of the City of Mitchell. I'm here to explain a little bit about where we've been with Lake Mitchell and where we plan to go. So Lake Mitchell originally was studied by fire engineering. My predecessor, Mayor Toomey, brought them on board to look at the lake and the sediment as well as the watershed and determine what the appropriate course of action as far as remedying the issues with Lake Mitchell, which is phosphorus-laden sediment in the bottom, which tends to release into the water, creating algal blooms, which create cytotoxins that are detrimental to the water quality of Lake Mitchell. One of the things that has happened with the water quality in Lake Mitchell is that we get a mat of algae and a very green color, soupy green color to the lake, which makes it undesirable for people to use. So with that study that FIRA did, they looked at the lake and then they looked at the watershed. Their recommendations was to provide work in the watershed to create wetlands to help remove sediment and phosphorus as it entered the lake. 53% of the phosphorus entering Lake Mitchell comes in from the watershed. There's a 47% of the phosphorus that gets into Lake Mitchell that causes the issues in Lake Mitchell is related to the sediment on the bottom. As the water becomes cleaner in Lake Mitchell, it readily absorbs phosphorus, and that phosphorus creates the algal blooms late in the summer, mid to late summer when the water warms up. Fire Engineering's recommendation was to look at a dredge project. When I took office, we started looking a little harder at what was going on with FIRA's study. It was determined that dredging was an option we wanted to look at further. We looked at numerous other options as well, one of them being Mr. Tucci with Lake Savers at the time, and is now Everblue Lakes, and the options he had. There was a time component associated with that. So what we decided was, in the interest of what we felt was better for Lake Mitchell, we went with Fire Engineering's recommendation to dredge the lake. In doing so, we made a contract with Bar Engineering, who had done dredging in several lakes, with the full intent of doing a hydraulic dredge. That means we leave the water in the lake, we bring in a barge that is capable of stirring up the bottom and sucking the sediment and water that contains that sediment out and placing it in a holding area where it drains off and dries out and creates soil that can be used. In our instance, we want to use that for a winter park, for a sledding hill, and summer hiking, biking trails. As we went along with Bar Engineering's design work, they determined that it might be in the best interest, or would be in the best interest, for the city of Mitchell to entertain mechanical dredging rather than hydraulic dredging for various reasons. One of the reasons is, in some of the areas we have 7 feet of sediment that needs to be removed, and in other areas we may have 6 inches of sediment that needs to be removed. When you're down to those 6-inch areas, it's very difficult for a hydraulic dredge to be able to remove that sediment with any accuracy and quality. So ultimately, the decision was made we would go forward with our draining down the Mitchell, putting in a drawdown, which would take the lake down to virtually the existing creek bed and remove as much sediment with mechanical dredging as was possible. At the time that we were initially started this design, we thought the cost of this project was going to be $10 million. We have since learned it is $13 million. So when we first started, the cost of dredging was a little bit less than what was being presented by the Everblue Lakes proposal, which was $11 million. So that's where we are to date.
Okay, so if you have questions, it's for the mayor. You'll just have to bring them to him directly. So John Dozier's very short speech, and then Susan Sharks, and then we'll throw it open to your speeches and questions. So, John Dozier.
Hi, I'm John Dozier, a city council member, and I'm here to share my opinion and view on the dredging of the lake versus what needs to be done to correct the problem with the algae in the lake that seems to happen year after year. We were told a year or two ago that half of the problem in the lake comes from the lake bed itself, and the sediment on the bottom of the lake creates or causes half of the problem, and the other half of the problem with the algae blooms is from the water source, being the Firesteel Creek and the watershed. That's one reason why we bought the Kelly property, so we could start by having holding ponds, if you will, that would filter and help clean up the source of the water to the lake. Now, I'm not opposed to dredging the lake. I'm opposed to doing it at this time. I think we need to solve the source of the problem before we spend all that money to have a Band-Aid fix, if you will. Something that may or may not, or certainly won't last without the water source being repaired or solved. And until we're told that the water source is significantly improved, I will still be against dredging. So that's kind of my position. Any questions, you can sure call me. You can reach me through the City of Mitchell website.
So thank you, John. He's not here, but appreciate that. And so now Susan Shark, she's got a pro speech, and then after that, we'll be looking for a con. Oh, Susan's right here. Do you want to just make your statement? So you'd rather just play it? Okay, that's fine. All right, yes.
I believe that saving our lake requires a two-pronged approach. We, of course, will always need to work on our watershed. There's that goes without saying. We have 350,000 acres of watershed to a 670 acre lake. So, of course, we need to work on that. We know that 50% of the problem is coming from the watershed. But the other 50% comes from our lake. And let me tell you why I think dredging is so important. In 2018, Fire sent a team of people to take some core samples of the sediment from the bottom of Lake Mitchell. The reason they did it was, multifaceted, but one of the reasons was they wanted to see what the composition was of that sediment that's at the bottom of Lake Mitchell. But additionally, they wanted to estimate how much actual soft sediment, how much phosphoric sludge sits at the bottom of Lake Mitchell. And what they were able to estimate after taking 62 core samples is that there is an estimated 2 million cubic yards of soft sediment, phosphoric sludge that rests on the bottom of Lake Mitchell. I want you to let that sink in just for a minute. 2 million cubic yards of soft sediments. In some areas there's a foot. In other areas there are 7 feet of this sludge. And so I want you to imagine that I have a bowl here. And in that bowl, I have put a thick layer of soft sediment, of sludge, of dirt, of phosphorus. And I just keep pouring clean water into it. And I can tell you that all the clean water in the world that we pour in to that dirty bowl is going to end up being dirty. There's just no way around it. You cannot expect clean water to stay clean when you're pouring it into a dirty vessel, and the same applies with Lake Mitchell. We have 2 million cubic yards of phosphoric sludge that is leaching up into that water, and it will continue to do so no matter how much clean water is coming in. If we are good stewards of our lake, then we will be dealing with the watershed in perpetuity. We have 350,000 acres of watershed that go into this 670 acre lake of ours. So we have to work with those farmers. We need to work with them to create buffer zones. We need to create wetlands and holding ponds. We need to plant plants that will filter out impurities before it enters the lake. There's just no question about it. Of course, we need to do that. But in addition to that, we have got to do something to get rid of the sludge that sits at the bottom of the lake. And there's no way that we can do that without dredging it out and getting it out so that we have a clean vessel to put that clean water, or that more clean water that is coming from the watershed. I just want to also say, as a cautionary measure, that when we're looking at other plans that are being presented tonight and that have been presented, that we're always comparing apples to apples. I think this is critical. So when you're hearing about these lakes that have been cleaned, I think it's important that you ask a couple of questions. First of all, was this lake that they cleaned up, a 680 or 670 acre lake with a 350,000 acre watershed? That's the first question. The second question, is that lake man-made? And if it is it 100 years old? So that it's had 100 years to accumulate phosphoric sludge at the bottom of it. Number 4, does it have 2 million cubic yards of sediment sitting at the bottom of that lake? And finally, is it freshwater fed? I mean, if any of those questions, if the answer is no, then you have to reject that theory because you're not comparing apples to apples. We need to make sure that anything that we are looking at is taking the unique characteristics of our lake into consideration. So that would be my cautionary tale, and I hope that we can get to the conclusion that we need to dredge the lake.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so just where we are now, we've got about a half an hour left, and what we're going to do is just give time for you to make speeches pro or con. And don't feel we just want to hear your thoughts. Don't feel like you've got to prepare anything. I mean, you've heard some prepared speeches. So just remember, we're all seeking the truth, right? And so feel free to speak whatever is on your heart, but you will need to be willing to take 2 questions when you're done. And so we need to go with a con first, because if we're going to keep pro, con, we did pro, con, pro, and now we're looking for a con speech. So a con speech. Okay. So I'm sorry, this gentleman over here also wanted to say a second word. Is there any person con speech that hasn't spoken yet? Anyone willing to make a con speech? And then we're going to close at 8:30. We'll close with two-minute closing arguments with no questions, and then we'll be done. So, and then some debriefing time. But a con speech. I'm looking for a con speech. Okay, there we go. Okay, yeah, why don't you come to the front, and so I think you could be seen a little bit better.
Okay, Mr. Moderator, I have a question for Ms.
So are you going to make a speech or ask a question?
I was going to ask a question.
Okay, so I'm looking for speeches.
Okay.
Can you hang on?
Okay, here's a speech.
Okay.
Okay, we just heard on the TV that if we take a clean vessel and we keep, or it's dirty, it's a dirty vessel, it's got mud and crap all on the bottom, and you keep pouring clean water in it, it's never going to be clean because it's dirty on the bottom. I'd like to reverse that. You take a dirty vessel, or take a clean vessel, if you clean Lake Mitchell, dredge it, and it's clean, but you got dirty water coming in from the creek. It doesn't matter how clean that water is, as long as all that dirty water is coming down the creek, you're still going to have dirty water. You just reverse the way she said it. So that's my speech.
Sure. That was. Any questions, gentlemen? Your name? Sorry.
Stuart Hanson.
Stuart. Any questions for Stuart?
Oh, right.
Any questions for Stuart? Seeing none, thank you, Stuart.
Hey.
A pro speech. Let's hear a pro speech. Brian. So we'd like you to stand up here for the live stream. Thank you.
So my name is Brian Clock. For whatever it's worth, I do live at the lake, and I've lived out there for a long time. And so when you go by South Harmon, or you go on the west side of the lake there, you'll notice where they dammed up the creek, and there's already a bunch of plants growing there, right? And it just literally took about a month and a half. And so now we've got reeds growing in there by Jack and Jill Holzberger's house that will help do exactly what we're trying to do, is clean up the watershed. So I think not only owning the land out that we bought, west of the lake, the city owns, is going to help the project. I think that's a great idea, okay? What I continue to pray for is the spillway just to break, so that we don't have this conversation anymore. Because look what happened over at Alexandria at Lake Hansen. It broke. Guess where everybody goes now? Not to Lake Mitchell. Drive right over here, 10 minutes to Lake Hansen, because the lake's clean, okay? But it's also been wiped out completely. And then once it got wiped out completely, they made the vote to dredge it. They dredged it, and continually it gets better and better, okay? 100-year lake. I've heard it say that when our forefathers designed this lake. They only designed it for 80 years. Well, guess what? We made it 20 years past that, and yet now we're not willing to invest that money? Those guys back then had it a really hard deal to come up with this much money. How much did the lake cost back then in today's dollar? We keep talking about 13 million, 24 million, 50 million. It was probably 50 million in the 20s or in the 1880s when they started this project. And it was daunting to them. Yet they voted for our town. They voted for the lake that brings professors here. And it's a big deal. And so as I travel all over the world, people talk about the Corn Palace. The first time I ever went to a board meeting at the Corn Palace, somebody joked about it. I stood up, I said, if I ever hear another joke about this, I'm out. I've served 9 years on the chamber board. I've served now 2-3 years on the Mitchell Area Development Board, and I'm really proud of Mitchell. I pound my fist really hard for this town. I sell parts all over the world, and people talk about the Corn Palace. People used to talk about Lake Mitchell. Now my friends who are my age group now have homes in Okoboji. They have trailers and cabins out at the lake in Chamberlain, right? They have places in Lake Madison. I remember when the beach used to be full of people and the lake was full of boats. We would purposely go early morning on Wednesday mornings or late on Thursday night to water ski because that was the only time there wasn't people out there. And I know there's people like Jerry Thompson and Mark Pitts and those guys who have, all age groups that have played out at the lake and done it successfully. And now here we are sitting on our hands saying, the only way we can do this is aeration. Well, all you got to do is drive through the canal and realize that aeration is not really effectively working. And that's just my opinion. So I'm all about doing the watershed and doing the dredge. Whether this is the right dredge, I don't agree with that maybe. I believe it should go all the way down to the other end, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian. So that's questions for Brian. Any questions for Brian? Okay. Oh, so I think he was first, and then, so yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Jeff Sand.
Hey, Jeff.
I'm a lifelong Mitchell resident. Like many of you, I deeply care about the community, care about the lake. My question, Mr. Moderator, so if we were to dredge, is there any sort of guarantee that it's going to work?
Yep.
Clearly, I don't know the answer to that, but my opinion on it is it obviously worked to dig a hole to build a lake, a man-made lake, way back when. And so I can't imagine that starting over 100 years later, we can't make this thing last for another 100 years, doing all the right things and taking all the right steps, because we are a man-made lake.
Thank you. Let's see, that was 2 questions, right? Or was that 1? That was just 1. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you had a question, ma'am.
Well, I agreed with everything you said, that we all want to see the lake.
I'm sorry. Got to make it a sure.
Moderator, I agree with everything the speaker said, that we all want the lake to be cleaned up. That's why we're all here. Although I did hear at the end of his speech that he was saying this may not be the exact right dredging plan, and that's kind of what this topic is this the right dredging plan? Maybe starting with the natural ways of the aeration and the restoring the ecosystem with Tushi's plan, has more of a guarantee than dredging and just seeing if it helps or not and spending that much money. So it sounds like he wants the same thing that we all want, but he doesn't even fully agree with the dredging plan itself that we're here to discuss. We all have the same end goal. So that's what I heard.
Thank you. Brian, you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, it's a statement, not really a question to me, which is fine. But I agree with you. And when we look at that dredging, right, I just don't think there's been enough vision cast within the city to explain to people, okay, we're going to go this far. Okay, if we had to go this much farther, which we all looked at and went, well, that would make perfect sense, then is that another 3 million? Is that another 4 million? And are you okay with that? Because if you would go back to when they built the Corn Palace, at some point they had to decide, we're going to be the only one, we're going to last this whole thing out. And it was the 20s, and those guys had guts, right? And so at some point, yeah, I get a little too passionate and a little too opinionated, but I also believe that that's kind of where it comes from. If you want the city to succeed, you have to be passionate about it. And so you got to try something.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. So we're looking for a con speech now. We're looking for a con speech. Yes, sir. Is there any, okay, thank you. And your name, sir?
Rich Darrington.
Rich Darrington.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
All right, I lied. It's not con. It's in between. Okay. I'm all about Lake Mitchell. Okay. All right, I'm about the community. I'm about everybody enjoying it. But one thing that if you lived here as long as we have, my family's been here since 1963. A lot of people would talk about Lake Mitchell and what they would say would be, oh man, I pulled walleye out, I pulled bass out, I got crappies, I got bluegill, I got all these fish. And then you would hear about the people who live there, how they went skiing. I did a lot of it. Sorry for the ones that I sprayed on the docks when I came by on the slalom. But the main thing about it is, the way I see it, the one thing that's really hindering us from doing this job correctly, dredging, yes, we need to remove the 2 million cubic yards. We do. But to do that, we have to find a way to supply POET with money. POET pays the city to draw that. That's a contract. So if we can find a way to supply them with water during this time when we fully drain it and we fully clean the lake, then we can start working on watersheds to filter it, because where's the water come from? Farms. And you're not going to turn around and ask a farmer to, hey, quit using fertilizer, right? What's South Dakota made of? South Dakota gets its economy from farming. That's where our money comes from. And if we don't have farming, we don't have South Dakota anymore, right? That's where I'm at with it. So on top of that, we need to look at being able to do the dredging, but I also believe in this guy right over here. No, I'm pointing to you. Yeah, I'm looking right at you. And the reason I say it is because if we do this and we do it right, and not the portion of it, but drain it, dredge it all, get it out of here, why can't we do the aeration to help maintain it and extend the life of it so we don't have to look at this doing it again in 100 years, maybe we make it 150 years, and we keep it in good shape so we can keep all that. That's what's going to draw people here. It's always about the fishing and hunting and our crops. I think the combination of both is what's going to make it work for everybody. That I'm willing to invest in. We're taxpayers, been paying it for years. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. Let's get it done. Okay? So I'm not up here for pros and cons. I'm just up here for the city of Mitchell and providing an environment where everybody wants to come here and they look forward to it.
Thank you, thank you. But you have to stay up here for questions. Let's see if there are any questions. A question for, did you say Charles?
Rich.
Rich Darrington. A question for Rich. Yes, Mike.
Are you?
You need to. And sorry, it's supposed to be addressed to
I
me.
address you. All right.
Thank you.
Are you for both then, dredging and getting the phosphorus out? Because one of my problems here tonight is when we talk about hydraulic dredging, we stir up and that's one of the problems that we had with it, was it stirs up all the phosphorus, bring it up into the water column, and then it's a smorgasbord for the algae. So we got to get the phosphorus out, and I haven't heard how the system will get the phosphorus out unless we dig it out first, and then you're talking about maintenance. And I think that may have some thought process after we get the sludge out. But that's my question to you. Are you for both of them?
Actually,
to the moderator.
I know it's silly, but it's our rules.
I know, and
Thank you, Mike.
he was shaking his head, and so he caught my attention, and
my thought is I would love to see it done through hydraulic, because that would solve supplying water to POET. The question is can we, if we drain the lake down low enough, does it make hydraulic more efficient to where they can get to the bottom and draw it out, yet we can still supply POET? Okay? If that is a feature, if that is an option, if it makes the hydraulic work better, then why would we not go that route? I'm up for the best way to supply, not cost us more, but I'm willing to invest if we get the long-term goal of it. Okay, that's what I'm thinking now. If it can't be done hydraulically, then we go the other route. But my point in dredging, if it's mechanical, is you drain it and you get end to end. Otherwise, you're kind of wasting your time. And to be honest with you, I'm not up to speed on all this. I'm not an expert, please, okay? I can treat water, but I don't treat soil. I don't work with phosphorus. But can we make the lake even a little deeper to buy us more time? I don't know how much clay base is there to help hold and retain it. It was a man-made thing. There's a lot of things to consider that's beyond the scope of what I know. But these are the questions that come to my mind. So which way is actually going to work the best? That's up to the experts.
Thank you. Thank you, Rich. So is this con or pro?
It's pro Mitchell.
Pro Mitchell, okay. So is there a con Mitchell voice here? No, just kidding. So let's a pro voice. Yes, Joe.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Yes. We'll hang on. Yes, sorry, Joe. We'll definitely get back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
My former neighbor, Art Rue, former mayor of Mitchell, made this statement to me some time ago, that when he was mayor, he tried to get the city council to put in slack water dams on Fire Seal Creek with an alum filter that could be increased, decreased, filtered, and this would help the runoff into the lake in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, there we go. Do you want to receive a question about that?
I don't have any answers for you.
Okay. So, Joe, since you were up, why don't you speak, and then the next one will be con after, because I know yours is pro.
Okay, my name is Joe Kippis. I'm with Friends of the Fire Steel. I guess the point I want to make is the dredging can be done very specifically. So once the lake has been drained, and they can do very accurate, specific sampling of the sediment, they can go to the areas where there's large concentrations of phosphorus. And even though they won't necessarily take all of the soft sediment out of the lake, they can go to the areas where the sediment is the richest in phosphorus. And so they can accomplish quite a bit more. They're being really smart about that. And so the problem then comes in, how do you explain that? Well, we're going to do 50% of the lake, but potentially do more than 50% of the phosphorus removal if they remove it correctly. And this is what my understanding is. Once the lake is drained, then they can go in and do this work. And they can become much more accurate in how they remove the phosphorus. That was the point I wanted to make.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Questions? Joe, would you like to receive a question? If anyone has a question for Joe? Yes. Rich. Oh, there. Oh, Stuart, I'm sorry. Rich is over here. Hi, Rich.
So, Bar Engineering said that $13 million is the budget for dredging. My question would be, when they hit $13 million worth of labor on dredging, are they going to stop, no matter how much is gone? Is $13 million, do they just pack up and leave?
And also, are they going to dredge all the way up into the campground bay?
My understanding is yes. They're going to go to the areas of the lake that contain the most phosphorus. And my understanding is that actually in the deeper parts of the lake where there might be heavy sediment, it might not be rich in phosphorus. For instance, around the Camp Arroyo area, those areas of the creek channel they're going to contain a lot, because some of the sediment that goes out takes the phosphorus with it, and earlier in the whole reservoir that's occurring. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. If their samples take them into the bays, then they'll take that out of there. And I don't know about the $13 million target. To me, Friends of the Fire Still and the Lake Advisory Committee was primarily focused on determining what the problem was and what a solution would be. And quite honestly, our desired solution wasn't draining the lake and dredging it. You know, that isn't what we wanted to do. That's where the data took us. And that's why we ended up being here.
The reason I asked is the map that they showed earlier, Jordan showed. The whole campground and all that, none of that is going to get drained. So that's from our engineer.
Yeah, and I think that there's other discussions since that point where they've talked about they can be more accurate with how they measure what should be removed. You know, because I asked the question, if you're only going to remove a portion of it, can you cherry pick? Can you go to the areas where the most phosphorus is located? And they said our sampling, once the lake is drained, can accurately tell us where that's at.
Thank you, Joe. We'll have one more con speech, and here's what we're going to do. So we'll have one more con speech, if there is one, and then we'll have closing speeches, and because of the order, Paula will go first, and then Jordan second, and then we'll gavel out, so I'll try to remember to gavel this time, and then a short debrief at the end, and we'll be done, okay? So if there is a con speech. We had several pro speeches, and I'm going to do my best to keep the order going properly, even though I've done a terrible job, and I keep forgetting about the Mr. Moderator thing. But okay, so would anybody like to make our final con speech? We've had several pros. I think we've had maybe a few more pros than cons, maybe. No final con speeches? Okay. And yes, we have one more.
All right. Matt Dorr here. Hey, great conversation on both sides. I think a few comments that we should consider too. We're all here for the same reasons. We have some doubt and uncertainty. From my understanding, even being in Mitchell for 7 years, we've studied this. There's a reason we haven't taken action, right, wrong, or otherwise. You know, there's a lot of business leaders and other thought leaders in the room. And one thing I think about as I solve problems for business or with my family, I don't know that if I'm looking at a problem, I solve it halfway. It's kind of like, hey, if we're hungry, I'm going to cook dinner and then walk away. So if we're going part of the way, I don't think that's a good solution. The other thing, too, is if we're comparing apples to oranges, if we just throw numbers out there, I play with numbers all day, smash my head against the keyboard, I think we do need to evaluate to say, all right, we have an $11 million solution. We have a potential $54 million solution if we go part way. Just my thoughts, if we continue to go the rest of the lake, I mean, if we're going halfway, just logical math says we have a $108 million potential solution. There's probably some efficiencies. Let's call 80 for kicks and giggles. Some significant consideration. And also, once the community invests this money, that money's got to come from somewhere. It's taxpayers. What other programs are going to slip? Somebody's going to take the hit somewhere. I'm of an abundance mindset. We need to do something. But at the end of the day, I think we're all here creating some doubt based on the current issues. And hopefully we can move forward through that.
Thank you. Any questions for this gentleman? I didn't get your name, sir.
Matt.
Matt. So a question for Matt, and here we go.
All right.
Yes, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. I just want to hear it. Just kidding.
Okay. Well, at the beginning, we heard the breakdown of the cost for this project. 54 million, 13 for the dredging, and I think there was 14 million for alum treatments. I mean, if we dredge the whole lake and actually do a good job of dredging the whole lake, do we need alum experts? Would you ask an expert?
I'll let Paula answer that question.
Yes, the need for alum is part of the continuing maintenance. So all alum does is mineralize phosphate that's in the water at the moment. So that's how we knock down stuff that the wetland misses. Oh, and by the way, the wetland's been contracted. It's going to be done by next November, so long before we could do this.
And so thank you, Paula. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So a question to me.
To you, yes. Oh, I was to the question, because he was to get two, yeah. My question was, we talk about 11 million versus 54, but the 11 million would have to be borrowed also. So what is the cost of the 11 million over time?
I can answer. Okay. So I've been wanting to answer this question.
Yes.
First, yes. We put a straw man plan on the table just as an example of how we would approach Lake Mitchell with other technologies. It's not a plan that is a final plan, but we tend to work in worst case scenarios. So it was $11 million spread over 10 years. It's not $11 million today. We're pay-as-you-go. We do performance contracting when we find lakes that we think we can fix, so that we share the risk by doing more treatment than we're contracted for if we're not getting the result. Increasing the amount of aeration to no cost to our customers if we didn't get it right the first time. So it is apples to oranges. My reason for being here 3 times in 3 years was not to sell this community an alternative. It was to help the community understand the limits of dredging as a lake restoration tool and open the conversation to some good things that have come out tonight, which is maybe a combined solution is the right solution. So that was, I just don't want to see a community make a multi-million-dollar mistake, because there is no history of these kinds of dredging projects delivering a multi-decade benefit for algae blooms.
Okay, great. So, thank you. So we're down to the very end. Paula's going to make a closing argument. Jordan's going to make a closing argument. I'll gavel out. And then please don't leave right away. We're going to do a real quick debrief. And so there we go. So Paula, closing argument.
All right. So we've heard a few things that dredging doesn't work. Well, no, dredging is the industry standard for eliminating contaminated sediments, even if they're contaminated with nutrients. And one thing that we should keep in mind is that, when we're talking about cleaning up the wetland first, our farmers are not the enemy here. They're doing a great job on a per acre basis. It's just that 350,000 acres, more phosphate is going to keep coming in no matter how good a job they do. So at the end of this, we've got Game Fish and Parks is excited to come in after mechanical dredging and help us rebuild a bottom to the lake that will support good fisheries. So we're going to have good ecosystem rebuilt. Now, if I was trying to sell you something, I'm not making any money off of this, I could say things that sound scary, like talking about arsenic blowing in the wind, but there's only arsenic in the lake bottom because there's arsenic in the dirt around here. And I think combines will spread more of it in the wind every fall than dredging the lake would. So this is the only way to, without stirring, get rid of that 10-ton reserve of easy-to-dissolve phosphate. And aeration can't change phosphate into anything. It won't make it go away. It'll only make go away the organic sediment that's holding the phosphate in place.
Thank you, Paula. Very, very good final speech. And now Jordan for the final speech, closing argument.
Do you want your gavel? I don't want you to forget it. Are you sure? Okay. I don't want you to miss on the most important part. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for coming tonight. I appreciate you listening to both sides from everyone. But look, I have spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours trying to figure out a solution to this lake. As I showed you earlier, I've read every single study we've spent millions of dollars on. And in those studies, it says we are not going to solve this algae problem by dredging it. I showed you the numbers. I've visited lakes with John I've visited multiple states, and I've talked to homeowners associations, lake associations that have fixed their lakes with our same issue. I've seen it. I proved it. You saw the videos. Now, I can't understand why our city would choose a plan that's more expensive, $30 million more expensive. It's more detrimental to our environment, and most likely, based on the numbers from the engineers themselves, will not stop algae. When we have a guy here that can fix our lake $30 million cheaper, it's more effective, and it's recommended by the EPA itself. Now, I want you guys to think about something on your drive home tonight and after this. The dredging plan and the alum, based on the numbers from a few months ago, is $40 million. That comes out to about $150,000 a month. We recently turned down a $2,000 one-time subsidy for CASA because we didn't have it in the budget for neglected children. How are we going to come up with $150,000 a month? There's two ways. One, we raise taxes, or two, our town suffers by losing other things. And I think we've seen enough suffering on bad decisions with this lake. Can you think of one single thing that our city has ever spent money on the opinion of an engineer that's been right? The first dredging, alum, trees, rocks, they've been wrong 100% of the time. And you need to remember, it's not the engineers that have to pay for this. We are the ones that have to pay for this. We're the ones in this city that has to live with this. If they screw up and they're wrong based on their reports, this is our home. And we have a guy that can fix it and save a lot of money.
All right, all right. Here we go. I'm back to being Joel. I love it. Thank you. Hey, you know what? Just this conversation, man, this is great. It is really good to have passionate positions laid out, and we get to hear all sides by very smart people. This has been really, really a lot of fun. So, I had something on the slide. I just want to, there's some sheets that we'll pass out as you go out. Next week, we're going to be here, there'll be a Zoom call with a guy named Rich Lagus. I'm really excited about having that. And then we're going to have another debate at the end of November on the topic, should we have cognition and what was it? Cognition tests for people who are running for presidency of the United States. So, so that'll be interesting. So, but before you go, let's just take a moment and I want to ask you two questions. What did you learn, and what could we do better? And so let's start with what did you learn? I just want to take a moment to debrief. What did you learn tonight? It was a lot of information, wasn't it? Any thoughts? Somebody needs to give me something because it was a lot of work to plan this. What did you learn? Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you. Not everybody's going to be happy with whatever we decide. Thank you.
So I have a question. I kind of want to dig into a few of the slideshows and like PowerPoints that we saw tonight, because there wasn't a lot of time to cover the
Right.
all of the stuff that we saw. So I think that'd be really interesting to dig into.
Okay.
More educated. Is
Yep.
going to be maybe a place that all of us could go through and read it? Because
Yep.
it's really hard to
Yep.
try to pay attention to kind of go.
No, yeah. So maybe. So I'll take that as what we could do better for the next time, or we could have a website or some place where you could go, where we could post. In fact, we've got to be able to figure out a way to do that, so people can look at your slides. Yeah. So I'm sure if you email Jordan, he'll send them to you. So, and Paula would too, I'm sure. Yes.
I really appreciate the fact that people 100 years ago invested in this community.
That's true, Boyd.
Why would we not want to invest in it
Yep.
today?
Yep.
I really appreciate it with this gentleman with the black hat. Sorry to know.
Can you come here, Boyd, so we can hear you? It's a live feed. Yeah, well, the live feed audience, and then.
So I really appreciated the fact that, was it Brian that said, they invested 100 years ago? Why would we not invest today? That was a wonderful point. The guy with the black hat sitting next to him, who kind of took the other point there, Rich, yeah, I mean, is what they're planning on doing enough? Is another couple $1,000 a little bit better? Combining the plans, excellent.
Yes, thank you. Closing thoughts, Jerry, I saw you.
Just a comment about what you could do to make it better.
Okay, yes.
It just seemed to me that when you started the conversation, and not trying to be critical at all, but the experts, it seemed that 4 minutes wasn't enough. Yeah, I think that the experts that came and are the experts needed more time to get into more detail, because I still don't feel like I understand. Yeah.
To expect them to get that into 4 minutes. And I talked to John about it before, and he said, yeah, okay, I'll give it my elevator speech. So I think you got about 5 minutes, actually. But so, yes, my daughter, Johanna.
I guess what I wanted to say is what I learned is that we all have different opinions. We all come here from different backgrounds, but we all want the same thing. We want what's best for Mitchell. We want what's best for the lake. So I think that's something that I learned and that I'm going to take away from it. So.
Thank you very much. So, well, thank you for coming this evening. This has been a tremendous pleasure and a joy for me. And we've got a lot of cookies left back there. So fill up your pockets with cookies before you go home, please. So thank you very much.